Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 195. We're going to be interviewing Crystal. How are you doing, Crystal?
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you on here and talk about your story. So let me ask you the first question here that I ask everybody. Tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Well, I had kind of a rough start in my childhood. I was born premature, 6.5 weeks early. I came home at 4 pounds, 6 ounces. I had my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. Um,
Ooh,
they say that you can tell who's born predator and who's born prey by how long you get to lie around sucking on teat per se, and um, I was definitely not necessarily born prey, but um, I had a rough start.
yeah.
And um, by the time I was two, they diagnosed me on my 2-year-old checkup. They diagnosed me with leukemia. They thought I had leukemia. They said I wasn't making red blood cells. And by 3.5 years old, I nonchalantly came up to my mom and was like, "Guess what I did today?" And she's like, "What's that, honey?" And I was like, "I sucked Mr. Blah, blah, blah's dick." And so my childhood started off pretty rough. Like
What age
I,
was
I
that?
went at 3.5.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it started with there. I mean, I hadn't even been making red blood cells for a whole year before I had already been introduced to that side of the adult world. And um, by the time I was in kindergarten, I had lost my virginity to my cousins playing house before I was even in kindergarten. Um,
How does a child even know about that stuff?
Well, I didn't. That's why I was like, "Guess what I did today, Mom?" I'm like, "How was your day, honey?" She left me with the babysitter, and it was an older gentleman. And my mom worked, my dad worked, and it was, you're like a lot of parents have experienced. They have to make the bills. They have to go to work,
Yeah.
So when she came home and asked me how my day was, I just told her what was going on.
And she did
Um,
not expect that.
no, definitely not. That man ended up in jail for multiple counts of not just myself, but from his nieces and stuff like that.
So he did go
Um,
to jail. Good.
yeah, he did end up going to jail. I mean, and I don't remember the event specifically, but I know my body did. My body did, my mind did.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then
tough
as
thing.
I grew older, like then I was reintroduced to those types of behaviors with my cousins. I was a very like I I got in a lot of trouble in like preschool and stuff like that for, inappropriate behavior. Like I remember the little boys on the playground would pay me like 5 cents to see my private parts in the TPs at the preschool playground. I was a very unhealthy, popular child, but I had no idea the detriment that it would cause in my adult life. Like I always kind of just figured that, oh, it doesn't phase me, like I'm this spiritual warrior badass, like, excuse my language, I don't know if
Oh,
that's
that's
appropriate
okay.
or not,
You can curse as much
but
as you want.
I'm like, I'm this spiritual warrior badass, like that this doesn't phase me, but little did I know that it affected every single decision. My decision making abilities as an adult like was greatly affected by the experiences I had as a child.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be doing stuff at 3 years old, that's pretty friggin' traumatic.
And then they put me in this room where they give you the anatomically correct dolls, and I'm just in this room playing with these anatomically correct dolls. And then all of a sudden they took my dad away. They started investigating my dad. So like I'm like 4 or 5, and they take me into this room. And then all of a sudden my whole family's disrupted. And at that time my mom had a mental breakdown, and I was staying with my mom. Me and my little brother were staying with my mom. And I remember I was learning how to whistle one day and I refused to take a nap, and my mom had this complete mental breakdown and started like stabbing everything in the house, and had to have my dad come and get me. I mean, it turned out that my dad, it wasn't like they were just investigating my dad, like they took him out of the house as a precaution. But as a young child, like I had no idea what was going on. Like all of a sudden my dad's taken away, like my mom stabbing up everything. It definitely like um taught me to keep my mouth shut, like to not say these things, to not exhibit sort of these sort of behaviors, or um which really put a detriment in my life, in my ability to say no. I went through my teenage years. I was a complete hell on wheels. Like, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was on Sally Jesse Raphael before I finished the fifth grade, for looking older than I was. And they flew us first class from New York, from Grand Junction to New York City. And like, we went shopping and got new clothes, and we were super excited to be there. There was like me, Misty, Francis, and Tamara. There was these other girls, and I was still so innocent minded at the time, that my idea in New York City of fun was counting taxis underneath my window. I remember counting like 200 taxis underneath my window in less than 2 minutes. And then we get to the studio, and they redressed us, and they tried to stuff my bra, and then they put us out on stage, and there were like older gentlemen that were antagonizing us, like, oh, well, if you dress like that, what do you expect? And once again, I kept my mouth shut, like, even though my whole insides were screaming, like, oh, they dressed us like this. um I just kind of sat there quietly, and just like went with the show. But I was on Sally Jesse Raphael by the time I finished the fifth grade year. And I got an award from my fifth grade teacher congratulating me for being brave enough to share my feelings on Sally Jesse Raphael.
Who's someone who contacted them?
My mother, my mom called. It was like, oh, does your daughter look older than she is, and it's driving you crazy? My mom was like, yep, and picked up the phone and called them. And they flew us first class out there. I mean, it was an interesting experience, but I definitely felt like it kind of set in the identity of being this rebellious, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what who you are, like, you're this. Like, it was just like overly sexualized, as a child, and then as a young adult, for sure. And then after we got back from New York, my father had moved in with my mom's best friend. Like, my mom and dad got a divorce, and he ended up marrying my mom's friend, which she found in a survivors group for traumatized women. And she was gathering information on, anytime that my mom and dad would fight or whatever, she would pick up little bits of information. Oh, well, she won't do this, well, I'll do that. So my dad ended up marrying my mom's best friend, and we moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where my grandmother was, where my mom's mom was. And we moved sight unseen at like 2 o'clock in the morning, to this apartment that was like 2 inches thick, full of cockroaches, you know. And I remember walking in with me, my mom, and my little brother at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and my mom just crying her eyes out. Like, not only is she going through a divorce, and she's had to deal with her own life traumas, without nowhere near the amount of help that we have now, or the understanding that we have now. Um, I remember it being very traumatic when we moved there. And right away, I fell into the worst group of kids I could possibly find, started ditching school in the sixth grade, had robbed this lady's house. I turned into a very rebellious teenager. But um, in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1994, we had just moved into a trailer park off of Washington Avenue. It was like our brand new start away from our cockroach infested apartments. Like, I was so excited to finally have my own room again, because me and my mom shared a room forever. My little brother had his own room, but me and my mom shared a room. I was super excited to have this, my own room. And my 13th birthday came with a lot of new changes. Like, now I had this phone that was now super glued to my head, my very own room, and the cute older guy with his own place and own car wanted me to come over. So I devised a plan to sneak out of my house. And right after my 13th birthday, I snuck out of my house for my very first time. And from the very first time I snuck out of my house was the very first time that I'd ever seen it. And from the first time I ever seen it, it came in a brick. And I thought I had found the love of my life, and we even had the same name. And my name's Crystal. Like, that was the first time that I had ever experienced methamphetamines, and it was with an older gentleman. And it, did you
How
lose
old were
me?
you
I was 13.
when you first smoked crystal meth?
Yes,
Uh, that was
at 13
what?
years old.
Yeah, that's crazy. What was the first drug you ever tried? Was that it?
Yeah.
That's a hell of a drug for the first one to do.
Yeah. By the time I was 14, I was in inpatient drug counseling. Like, I thought I found the love of my life, and we even had the same name. I used to make jokes about it, like, oh, we even have the same name, like Crystal, all right. Um, and I turned, like, I turned very, like, I started running away. I was an inpatient No, outpatient. I was in outpatient drug counseling by the time I was 14 years old. And then my mom lost everything. Like she lost her job, we lost our house, we lost our apartment. She was going through her own difficult times. I mean, it's hard enough to raise two children, in Vegas, um, and we ended up moving into Naked City, which is like right next door to the Stratosphere. Like I lived on Las Vegas Boulevard when I was like 14 or 15 years old. My
That's a
next door
dangerous
neighbors were
place to be.
prostitutes. My next door neighbors were prostitutes. I remember the first time I ever smoked crack was with the lady that lived next door, and she always used to try to give me these sequined belly shirts, and introduce me to her older gentleman friends.
How old were you when you
Um,
first smoked crack?
14?
So you
No,
were coming
15.
along
Right,
quickly.
in between 14 and 15.
Okay.
And I ditched my entire freshman year of high school. My half my sophomore year, I ended up getting kicked out my junior year. And I was in and out of drug counseling, and I was constantly running away. I My other addiction I had was to codependent relationships. Like I not only was trying to fill a void within myself with drugs, I was trying to fill a void, and maintain this identity I had of this wild, like girls gone wild type of teenager. Like I was always hanging out with older gentlemen, running away. I was hell on wheels for sure. And I then moved into the desert with this homeless boy that I met. And like I tried to go to high school, like I lived in a coven, like there was all kinds of stuff. Like there was all kinds of happenings that happened from the time I was 13 until the time I moved from Vegas, which was around 17 years old.
What's a coven exactly? Is that,
The coven, like I grew up very pagan, like a witch's coven. Like
yeah, that's what I
um
thought.
there were there were a bunch of people that lived in those apartments. It was called the Aztec, and it's right on Las Vegas Boulevard. It's right next to the Stratosphere. And if you look up the worst places to live in Las Vegas right now, my old apartments pop up, and they're all condemned and boarded up. And like I lived there when there was life. I mean, sure, there would be people getting their throat slit on my front porch at, Christmas Eve. There were still blood stains on the floor. Like, I've seen somebody get their head blown off. Like I used to like go to the bus stop on at 4 o'clock in the morning on Las Vegas Boulevard trying to actually go to school. And I got picked up by a cab driver one time, and I thought he was just being nice. I was like, oh wow, these people are just so nice. And he ended up taking me to his house, and he thought I was a prostitute, and I didn't know how to tell him no. So he ended up doing what he did with me, and he dropped me off in front of the gas station by my school and gave me $20 and a pack of cigarettes like I was a cheap prostitute. And I never said anything to anybody about it. I just went went through my day like nothing had ever happened. There was a lot that I went through that like disassociation was probably one of my favorite mechanisms for escaping like my actual reality, you know.
Gotcha.
And um after I got kicked out of school, like I lived in the desert with this homeless boy. Like we moved into, I called it bum utopia. There were hundreds of people that lived in this desert, and like we made this little hut. It was like this two roomed hut. We had a California king size bed. We pulled all the pieces out of a junkyard that was right there. And we had like a fireplace and a flue, and it was like this little house that we built in the desert in bum utopia that I was literally living on the streets when I was like 15, 16 years old in Vegas.
Where were your parents?
Well, my dad was in Grand Junction, married to my mom's best friend, and my mom didn't know how to cope. There was absolutely no control over me. She would try different things. She would ground me. She'd be like, "Oh, you're grounded." And I remember one time after I just came home, I was barefoot. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I had some runners from California come, and they're like, "Hey, we've got this fire. We just need $60 to get back home." You know what I mean? And there was like 4 ounces of crystal, of dope. And I was like, "All right, cool. Let me make one phone call." And my mom's like, "Where are you going? You can't go anywhere. You're grounded." And I'm like, "I'm not gonna go anywhere. I don't even have any shoes on." Well, I took off anyways. Like I took off at 8 o'clock in the morning barefoot, so I could I could get these guys their $60, and then the rest was mine. And that was one of the scariest points. Like I think I was up for about 30 days straight. And then once all the drugs ran out, everybody started fighting with each other. They were fighting with each other and fighting with each other. And I really didn't have anywhere to go. And my grandma was in the hospital at the time. So I had her keys because I used to help take care of her because she had like diabetes. And, I would go over there and poke her finger and like help her do her laundry and whatnot. And she was in the hospital. So I had her keys to her apartment. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to my grandmother's house. So I go to my grandma's house and I called my mom. My mom's like, where are you? What's going on? I mean, I'd been gone for about a month at that point, took off at 8 o'clock in the morning barefoot. She hadn't heard from me since. And I called her and I was like, okay, well, I'm arranging to come home. Like, I'm going to come home, and she's like, okay. So I hang up the phone and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a nap. And I laid down to take a nap, what I thought was a nap. And when I woke back up, I called my mom and she's like, what the fuck, Crystal? Where have you been? It's been 4 days since you called me. Like, I literally slept for 4 days straight. Like, I didn't get up to pee. I didn't get up to eat. I didn't get up to anything. Like, it completely blew my mind. Like, at that point in my life, I remember looking down at my wrist and I could touch my pinky all the way to my middle knuckle, you know? And I can't even touch my pinky now. Like, I can't even touch it, but I could touch it all the way to my middle knuckle. And yeah, then I went to Job Corps. Like, I ended up going to Job Corps and I got kicked out of Job Corps. And after I got kicked out of Job Corps, like, my mom had packed up all of our stuff and we moved to Pueblo, Colorado, which is where I'm at right now, is Pueblo, Colorado. And um, I continued off and on, like, I wasn't as hardcore into methamphetamines when I first moved to Pueblo because I didn't really know anybody, I didn't know where to find it. And I started hitchhiking and hopping trains. Like, I traveled with the Rainbow family for years, and I was still in and out. Like,
What's the Rainbow family?
the Rainbow family is like a group of gypsies. It's like the world's largest non-member, non-organization that there is. It happens all over the world and it happens all year long. Like, people gather in the national forest for like, the nationals is in July. There's nationals and there's regionals that happen, and it happens all year. It's literally like a band of moving gypsies, and it's all colors, all creeds, all nationalities, all classes that all form together that are joined as a rainbow, and it'll be known as the Rainbow Warriors. It's like based off of a Hopi Indian prophecy, you know. And I traveled with them for a long time. Like, I used to hitchhike and hop trains, and then I lived on school buses and um, in and out. Like, I didn't have as much of a hardcore, methamphetamine addiction then. Like, I did get into needles like a little later in life. I was in Albuquerque, and I was staying with a guy that was a vet in the military. He was a not a vet, med. He was a med person in the military,
Medic.
and yeah, medic. And he had a real bad like intravenous coke problem. So of course I fell to that situation, and
You started
to the
shooting
point,
up coke.
yeah, where I was pulling needles out of a Russian roulette can when there were no fresh ones, and I still couldn't even do it myself. And I had already developed like that much of a want, of a need of trying to get that first one back. So I escaped out of there and never went back to needles. Like, it was a very, very short, but very eye-opening experience for me. You know, um, I left that situation and, like, I hitchhiked back and forth across the country for years. Um, and then I found out that I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant before my 21st birthday. And I hopped the train back home and kind of stayed with my mom. And then after I found out I was pregnant, like, I swore I would never do drugs again, like, and then I kind of turned to the bottle. I'm like, well, at least it's not fucking meth, like, that was my excuse for drinking 3.5 gallons of Jack Daniels. And, like, I partied with punk rockers, like, they would go through 3, 4, 5 cases of PBR, like 3, 4 half gallons of Kentucky Deluxe, and it was like the cool thing to do, you know. And then I joined a band. I learned how to tattoo. I stayed off of meth, the whole time that I had my son, until I relapsed. Um, he was about 15 when I started doing meth again, and I went from absolutely nothing to full on, like, running 100 miles a day, um, just absolute dumb shit, and my friend ended up getting shot by the police. Like it
What did he
was
do that he got shot?
he got caught in a stolen car, and I think he shot at them or something,
Huh.
and
Yeah, you don't shoot at the police.
they turned him into a quadriplegic, but
Oh, that's no good. He got shot in the spine.
yeah,
That's terrible.
yeah. So it like, and they were going to release him to me, and it was weird because I kept telling him, if I could give you anything, I would give you your freedom. And it's like now all of a sudden he had his freedom, but he couldn't move. It's like this weird, like he actually just recently passed away from those injuries, like years later. you know um it just got real I got real bad real fast. Like all of a sudden my once house that was a family home was now like a trap house where I was finding needles, like hiding in places. And um like I went from not having a door on my bedroom to now my door was constantly locked. And it started out with a relationship. Like I'm like, oh well, I really like this guy and I want him to trust me. And so I'm gonna do this with him. And then it would be from me only doing that with him to, oh, why don't you just break me off a piece and I'll take it home, to, well, fuck that, I'm gonna start selling this shit so I have my own shit. And yeah, it got bad. I was pretty fortunate as far as like the positions that I could have been in compared to like where I'm at now, you know.
So at what age did you realize? I mean, 'cause it sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff. What age did you realize you had a problem?
I didn't realize I had a problem until about 2 years ago. I am exactly 21 months sober as of yesterday. And
Congratulations.
thank you very much. And I didn't realize that I even remotely had a problem. Like I started going to therapy for my childhood problems, and then I ended up in a relationship with somebody that was doing inappropriate things with his daughter. And um, I had to turn him in, which caused a whole other set of, like, I completely lost myself. Like I gave up the will to live. Like I was so mad at God and I was so mad at the universe and I was so angry that I had been put in that position. Like it was one of the roughest things that I ever had to do, was to actually face the reality that somebody that I loved was doing inappropriate shit with his daughter. And it took me a long time to like understand like how hard that was, which gave me a huge perspective towards like my mom, like towards my mom's mom. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, was making that phone call. I kept telling myself, well, what if you're wrong, Crystal? What if you're wrong? And I kept seeing these things, and the more it just wouldn't go away. And I started doing research on, the different types of pedophiles, and like what they do and what grooming is, and all of this intense research about this person, because I didn't want to falsely accuse him.
It's a
But I
big
also
decision.
it was the hardest decision I've ever, like, I it it broke my soul, man. It absolutely broke my soul. But at the same time, it gave me a lot of awareness. Like I gained a lot of awareness of of how hard, because before I was always like, oh well, if I ever found a motherfucker doing that, I would just cut his balls off, this and that, da da da, like. And then once I got like, oh my God, am I seeing this? Am I not seeing this? Am I seeing this? Am I not seeing this? I mean, I loved him. It was really difficult for me to face that reality that that was actually going on. And then nothing ever, like, I never got to talk to the cops. I never got to talk to anybody. Like, it was all handed off to I mean, because the little girl wasn't mine. And that was one of the things that used to tell me all the time, well, she's not your daughter. There's nothing you can do about it. Like there was there was a lot that happened. And it made me understand like how difficult it really is. And um it gave me a lot more like forgiveness towards like my family, towards my family's family that didn't have the strength to face that reality. You know, it was really difficult. You know, I lost you.
Sorry about that. So once you realized you had a problem, what did you do about it?
Well, um, at first it was just kind of like in my mind, like, oh, I have a problem, like I need to do something about it. But like I kept having the same people around me, you know. Um, One of the first things that I had to do was get rid of the people that I had that were around me. Like you can't change yourself living in the same environment. You can't heal in the same environment that's hurting you. So like I had to really learn how to say no. Like saying no was one of the hardest things that like as an adult I didn't even know that I didn't have the ability to have, because as a young girl, like my ability to say no was kind of taken from me. So as an adult, I didn't realize that I didn't have the ability to say no. I would always say yes. So can I come live with you? Yeah, sure, even though I didn't want to. So I really had to go inside and learn how to honor my true feelings, to stop saying yes to things that I didn't want to do, to stop saying yes to people that I didn't want living with me, to stop saying yes to situations like, no, I'm not going to go run this freaking pound of whatever to whoever, like I'm not going to put myself in that position. Like I don't care if you're going to be my friend or not, because I had gotten real used to and accustomed to being the nice one, like, okay, yeah, I'm down, I'm down, let's go do this, and that actually put it put me in a lot of situations that I didn't need to be in because I didn't know how to say no. So one of the first steps that I took towards my recovery um, was removing the people in my situation that I knew were bad for me. It wasn't that I didn't love them. It's just I was trying to learn how to love myself. And so I started slowly like distancing myself from the people. I got rid of, I had to evict one of my best friends that lived in my backyard. That was like one of my biggest first steps towards my recovery, was getting rid of, the people that I loved. I loved them, but I couldn't continue, doing what I was doing and having my son like disown me, and you know um having these boyfriends that wouldn't leave. And it got too chaotic. Like I realized I was how unhappy the life I had was, like I had cameras on my cameras. I couldn't trust anybody around me. I was falling asleep in my car. My son didn't want to come home. My mom was worried about me. Like she always had that worried tone. Oh, what are you doing? You know what I mean? There was always this worried tone behind her. So I had to stop getting rid of those people, or start getting rid of those people. And like I started getting into spirituality. Like I found the whole term star seed, and light worker, and smoking with my ex-boyfriend. Like we were blowing clouds of smoke into a black background, because I heard you could see demons faces or whatever in this in the smoke from smoking meth. So we were taking this black background and we were blowing bubbles into this in a cloud and taking pictures. Well, it wasn't like demons that I ended up seeing. It was faces of people that I knew. Like one looked like my neighbor that lived in my backyard, one looked like my boyfriend, and like it dawned on me that those were the souls that this drug had taken, you know? So then I started really doing research about Archangel Azrael, which is like the angel of death. Because my boyfriend at the time kept asking me, "What's your demon's name, Crystal? What's your demon's name?" And the only name I could come up with was Azrael. So I started doing research on who Azrael was, and Azrael isn't a demon. Azrael is the archangel. He's an archangel. He's the angel of death. Which completely fascinated me. And then I started doing more research into what role Azrael played, and he's the helper of God, he who helps God. And I started like really delving into the whole spiritual side of stuff. Like I'm like, I'm a star seed. I'm here to uplift the consciousness of the planet, you know, like I'm here as a volunteer and none of these things happened to me. They happened for me, like almost like a sin eater. Like I had a tattoo shop at one point and my tattoo shop was named Sin Eater. And a sin eater used to get paid by the rich people in town to eat the sins of a deceased person so that they could get into heaven. And to me, like the whole idea of being a star seed was like the real life version of like a sin eater, but like on a galactic scale, you know, and it was something that I really identified with. Like once I started hearing, you know, and like doing research about what a star seed, what it was and what my mission was here to do, like anytime anybody asks me what my job is, I tell them that I'm a light worker, that I'm a star seed. You know, it doesn't matter. I'm here to uplift the collective consciousness. Excuse me. I'm just getting over being sick, so excuse me.
So, what do you do nowadays to keep yourself sober?
Well,
Give
I
us some
found
tips and
purpose.
tricks.
I
You found
like
purpose, you said?
purpose. Yeah. I found that, well, I found recovered on purpose. Recovered on purpose, like this guy ended up in my inbox out of nowhere, like during the COVID thing. And he was asking me about polyamorous relationships because my relationship status said or open. But really, I meant that I was in an open relationship with God. Excuse me. uh, and and I was like, well, who is this guy that I'm talking to? Because I have like 5,000 people that are on my Facebook page because I was in a band. I sang for a punk rock band and was a tattoo artist. And like during my like after I found out I was pregnant before I relapsed, like I had got a degree and was in a band and traveled and you know had my own tattoo shop. And then after I relapsed, like that all fell apart. But um he ended up in my inbox asking me about open relationships, you know, but my open relationship meant that I was in an open relationship with God. And I was like, well, who is this guy that I'm talking to? You know, who is this Adam person? So I go to click on his profile and it said owner and co-founder of Recovered on Purpose, you know, and I was like, Recovered on Purpose? What the fuck does that mean? You know, like recovered on purpose. Like it just kept going on and on in my head, you know, because we used to make jokes, me and my friends would be like, oh, this moment of silence is brought to you on by mistake, or you know, this moment of silence was brought to you on purpose, you know? So when I ran across the recovered on purpose, like just those words, I was like, what? Like I not only just, I wanted to say it and mean it, you know, because I have a tendency to say what I mean and mean what I say, you know, to the best of my human ability. So I was like, man, I really just want to say that and mean it. And I started like he does podcasts like you do, you know, and he like I started watching him, you know, and I just kept saying that to my mind. I'm recovered on purpose, even as I'm smoking, you know, like no, I'm recovered on purpose, you know. I started using the law of attraction to help change my inner dialogue so that I can create my outside world or change my outside world, you know. That's how I quit smoking cigarettes. Like I'm like I'd be smoking a cigarette and I'm like I don't smoke cigarettes, you know. And the more I told myself that, like I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, you know. I told myself as I was like I wrote a book and
That's great.
yeah, I wrote a book. I just published it on my 41st birthday, October 2nd, and it is Say You Love, a testimony of triumph over the darkness of childhood addiction and childhood trauma and addiction. And I dedicated it to my inner child, you know. Um, but I learned how to do all of this through Recovered on Purpose, you know. Like I just kept watching in the background. I didn't say much, you know. I would comment or like or whatever, and I just kept telling myself that like no, I'm recovered on purpose, and I really just wanted to mean it, you know. And then I found out that he was doing a speech at a, a meeting. So I drove up to Springs. I'd never been to an NA meeting or an AA meeting before, you know, and he was up there speaking. So I was like, I'm going to go up there to go to this meeting, you know, and I showed up late. And I think I was 30 or 60 days clean at that point. You know, I was really proud of myself. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm doing it this time. Like I'm super, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go meet this person. I'm gonna go to this meeting, and I show up late, and I go up to go walk up to the door, and like I could hear him talking, and there's like a whole room full of people, and I would go and put my hand on the doorknob and be like, no, 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 you can't go in there, and then I would sit down on the steps, and I was still smoking, so I was smoking a cigarette, and I'm like crying, like, why'd you even come up here if you're not even gonna go inside, And I would go and stand at the door again and try to open it and be like, no, 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 you can't go in there, you'll disrupt everything. So then I'd go sit back down again, and then finally somebody seen me, through the window of the door, and he's like, come inside, and he opened the door, and I was like, I tried to take off booking, like, oh shit, busted, and he made me go inside, and the only seat available was like in the very front row, and Adam, like, I disrupted the whole thing, and I come and sit down like right in the very front, and like I remember being so nervous, like I was embarrassed, I was nervous, like I'd never been to a meeting before and didn't even know exactly why I was there, but I'd actually made it inside. So then I started going to meetings. He assigned me a sponsor, which I had no idea what a sponsor was. I was like, okay, sure, sponsor, all right. Like I don't know what this means, but I'm down, And like I was very welcomed. Like everybody hugged me. They gave me all these phone numbers, like all this stuff. But my sponsor lived in a different town than I did. So that didn't end up working. And I felt like they were gonna think I was a failure, Like I was like, oh well, they're just gonna think that I'm failing, that I just went back to doing this, And it was like kind of like my own personal mission to be able to say like, no, I am recovered on purpose, and I don't think that Adam took me very seriously, like I'm sure he gets a lot of messages, oh yeah, blah blah blah, and he signed a book to me, and I started going to other meetings. I went to a meeting with one of my other friends, and I had no idea where these meetings were. He would just be like, okay, we're going to go here. He's like, turn here, we go here, I'm like, all right. So we go to this meeting, and I was directly across the street from where I used to pick up every day. Like not on the same block, not not on the same street, like directly I could see the door that I used to go to every day to pick up. And I sat in my car and was like, wow, like I am directly across the street from my addiction, you know? Like I didn't even know that there were meetings across the street from this place when I used to pick up there all the time. Like I couldn't believe that where we were was directly across the street from where I used to pick up, And I kind of just sat in the car for a while, like contemplating and, thanking God that I had made it across the street. I was like, wow, I am directly across the street from my addiction. And I just kept taking the steps towards it, like um, making amends to people, telling people like I was never quiet about it. I'm like, no, I am recovered on purpose. Like, oh yeah, I'm a recovered addict, not not that I am an addict. I think that saying that you are recovered is important, not like, oh, hi, my name is Crystal and I'm an addict. Yes, but I'm a recovered addict. Like I have purpose, and I really feel like my purpose, like it was a testimony, it was Adam's testimony that really inspired me to to change, to be clean, to do these podcasts like what you're doing, to reach out to other people. Cause I feel like once you've come out of it, it's like our responsibility to reach down and grab the next person and try to pull as many that are reaching as possible. I mean, we can't reach people that aren't reaching, but the people that are really like really want to do it. I mean, nobody can do anything for anyone that doesn't want to, you know? It's like we have this idea that something is going to save us. Like, yes, there is a being higher than myself. And like when you pray to God for strength, it's not like you're just going to magically get all this strength. Like you're going to get situations that build your strength, like when you pray for recovery, it's not like it's just going to be handed to you on a silver platter, but you will have these options that if you do it, you can do it, if you take what's given to you as an opportunity rather than a punishment, then it actually works, you know
Yeah. Sounds like you've had quite the journey.
it's been a long strange trip for sure.
What's that from?
Like Grateful Dead.
Okay, Grateful Dead. Yeah, I know it was
Yeah.
something like that. I was gonna say that. Um, so getting towards the end here, let me ask you one last question.
Okay.
Do you, and you kind of gave some already, but did you have any advice for people watching and listening? Anything specific that you think? It's going to help them in their journey of recovery. That's helped you.
The number one thing that helped me in my recovery was the way I talked to myself, you know?
That's a
The
great one.
way the way I talk to myself, like, I mean, I used to go around, oh, you're never going to do this. You're never going to do this. You're never going to do this. Like, you're never going to make it out. You're always going to be worthless. You're always, and then I realized that I was just like, the universe only says one thing. Like, it's not this almighty being that's like judging us. All it says is that's correct. Here's some more of whatever you believe. So when I stopped telling myself that I was worthless, and when I was telling myself that I was worthless and that all my friends were just using me, and that, everybody's a liar, that's all the universe was providing to me, because that's what I believed. It's like, yes, that is correct. Here's some more of all your friends are liars. You are worthless. Here's some more things that are going to install that belief into you, because that's what you believe, right? When I started saying I am recovered on purpose, I am writing a book, like I started saying that I am a published author while I was writing my book, even though I hadn't published my book yet, our internal dialogue, the universe only says that that is correct. Here's some more of that. The universe, God, whatever you want to call it, the Most High. Here is, you are correct. Here is some more of whatever it is that you believe, and I'm going to continue to supply you with more evidence to prove that that's correct. So if we're constantly like, oh, I have to save this money, I have to save this money, I have to save this money because there's not enough money, there's not enough money, there's not enough money, that's all we're going to get back is some more evidence of, yes, that is correct. You have to save this money, you have to save this money. If you're constantly like, oh, I'm never going to win, I'm never going to win, I'm never going to win, here's some more of, yes, that is correct. You're never going to win. So I think changing our internal dialogue, and like, because words are very powerful. I mean, we're speaking directly to the universe, like inside ourselves all the time. It doesn't matter if we say it out loud or not. The universe doesn't respond to what we say; it responds to how we feel. You know, and it might feel really awkward at first to be like, yeah, I'm recovered. Even while you're still smoking a bowl or whatever. But keep telling yourself, I am recovered. Like, I am beautiful. I am worthy. Keep telling yourself these things, because eventually the universe will have no other choice but to provide you um with evidence that makes that correct. I am recovered. That is correct. Here's some more of I am recovered. And the more you continue to tell yourself this, not only will you believe it inside yourself, you'll start to actually see it outside of yourself. Because just like every seed in the world, like, everything starts from within. If we can change our world from within, we can change our entire world from outside of us. And together we can change the entire world altogether. But it starts inside of ourselves, you know?
Thank you for that. It's been
You're
fun.
very welcome.
Well, I don't want to say fun, but it's been good interviewing you. I really appreciate you sharing your strength and everything you've been through and how you came to recovery. It really means a lot coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Like, I'm kind of new to sharing my story. So, um,
Well, you
sorry
did a
if I
great
seem a little
job.
nervous or,
You just said you were open and honest, so that's all that matters, and that's
yep,
what helps
I'm an
people.
open book, literally.
Yep, literally an open book. So, one more time, the name of your book. Put it up close.
It is called Say You Love by Crystal Lavender, and it's on Amazon.
And that's crystal lavender, like the soap,
Like the color.
like the color.
Yeah, Crystal Lavender.
All right, perfect. So hopefully people will find that.
And it's a testimony over triumph over the darkness of childhood trauma and sexual addiction. It's like not my whole biography, but it fits in your back pocket. Like, I wanted to make sure I could go give it to people underneath the bridge.
So part of your story is also sexual addiction.
Yes.
Before we go, tell us a little bit about that, because I've had some people. It seems like people are more secretive about their sex addiction. It seems it's like, I put it this way: I haven't had many people do it. I've only had one sex addict do the podcast, or at least I've only had one person admit they had a problem with sex. But I think I've noticed a lot of addicts have sex issues and they have codependency issues.
Yeah, it will, because to me, like, sex equaled love, you know?
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Some people think that way.
Yeah, and that was my biggest problem, is that I thought that sex equaled love, and it codependency was definitely up there. Like I'm still in boy rehab, like I'm still a recovering codependent addict. Like I was always trying to fill a void, but you can't get over one relationship by getting on top of somebody else, or under somebody else. Like there was never any time for healing, and I think that I used sex as a form of love, and it just ultimately ended up making me feel less about myself rather than more, and the person that I was with, ultimately ended up thinking less about me than more, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't know, like that. I read this book one time called Why Men Love Bitches, and um it's like a lot of us girls, like we try so hard, like, okay, oh, you want me to come do your laundry at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll be right there, you know what I mean? Like we're the perfect girlfriend, we're, like all this, and we think that that should make somebody like appreciate and love us more, but really it doesn't, because we're not showing that we love ourselves, you know and if you don't love yourself, like how is somebody else supposed to show you the respect and the love that you are searching for if you can't even give it to yourself, you know and I found that, like, being alone on purpose, like I am single, celibate, and sober on purpose with purpose. It's not because I don't have people trying, it's because I have a purpose. I have healing inside of me. You know, um, I have growth that I need to take accountability for. Like I let a lot of situations happen that I didn't want to happen. I involved myself in a lot of things that I thought was love because, I mean, as that's kind of I was groomed into believing that, not only through my own childhood experiences and my young adult experiences, but through music, media, TV, they like we have this idea like like porn, like you want to be this rock star porn star, but that's completely like those people aren't having a good time. They're performing, they're a performer, and we don't really
Yep.
look at it. We don't look at it like they're performing, and I got into a very much like I was never actually present because disassociation, like even if I was in the moment, I wasn't in the moment, I was performing. So it took a long time for me to actually be in the moment, and the best way that I can give advice for learning how to be in the moment is to pick one person in your life that you give your undivided attention to, right? It is so easy, like when people come in, your kid or your, significant other or your boss, you could pick any one person you want throughout the day. But when they come to talk to you, give them your undivided attention. Listen to what they're saying, respond back to them. Don't pick up your phone. Like it's a lot harder than we think it is to even give one person our undivided attention, but it's definitely like that practice has helped me like be more here now, to not perform, to actually be present.
Yeah. Listening is an amazing tool.
For sure. Most people listen to respond, you know
Yep. They want to be able to hear their own voice. So they're just sucking stuff in. They're not really they're hearing the person, but they're not really listening.
yeah, we listen to respond, or we listen to control. Like if our kids come to us telling us about a problem, we listen to control. Like we try to fix it instead of just listening and trying to see where they are in their moment. We instantly try to fix and control, and we have a hard time just listening, you know
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, that's one of the reasons I created Addicts Anonymous. I want to have addicts of all shapes and sizes. You know what I mean? Whatever the addiction is, come find a place. So hopefully this reaches someone that might have a sex addiction, but there's a way out.
there's definitely a way out. Like there's always a way out, always. I mean, you can't have a bad day with a good attitude, and you can't have a good day with a bad attitude. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
and that goes with everything. Whether you believe you can get out of it or you believe you can't, you're correct in your own world. You know, like
yeah,
what you believe is ultimately what, like, if you don't believe that it's possible, then the universe will say that is correct. Here is some more. It is not possible. You know? But if you
Yeah.
start to actually change your inner dialogue to it is possible, the universe will say that is correct. It is possible. And it is 100 million% possible. But you have to actually start to believe that, you have to find that spark, that hope, that one little bit, to make it grow brighter until it actually is. Because there is 100%, like, we do recover. It doesn't matter if it's shopping, gambling, codependency, sex addiction. Like, some people are addicted to anger. They just love being angry. They love the chaos. There's so many different forms of addiction, and if you are trying to control something, that means it already has control over you, you know? If you're thinking to yourself, like, man, I need to get this under control, that's step number one. That's realizing that you have a problem, that's becoming aware. And I think awareness is like key, because before you're aware of stuff, you have no idea, you know? You're like, oh, I don't have a problem. I'm not, once if you're not aware of it, then how can you actually like face it if you have no idea? And I really think the only mistakes we make in life are the ones that we don't learn from. Because if we honestly don't know that the stove is hot and we touch it, how is that actually a mistake? It's not, it's a mistake. You'll get an opportunity. Are you going to touch that hot stove again? But once you realize that you have a problem, is just like touching that hot stove. The burn's going to get deeper and deeper and hotter until you what? You have no hand left to touch it anymore. You know, I think the punishment for, like, once we're aware that we have a problem, then it's like connected to the universe. The universe knows, we know. So it just gets harder and harder, and I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life where, like, oh man, this relationship is no good for me. This relationship is no good for me. And had I have just listened to my inner self at that point, it wouldn't have turned into full on tower moment later, because the universe will kick that tower over. And if the universe does it, it's usually a hell of a lot worse than if we're just like, okay, I've got to take accountability for this. Now I'm going to do it myself. Because if we don't do it ourselves and the tower gets kicked over, it's usually like way, way worse than if we would have just done it ourselves, you know?
Yeah. So once again, it's been really fun having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you doing it. Did you have anything else you want to throw in?
If anybody is struggling, you can always reach out to me. If my story has touched you in any way, you need advice in any way, um, feel free to message me. Always reach out.
How would they get in touch with you?
I am on Facebook, Crystal Lavender on Facebook. You could also go to my website, which is crystal-lavender.com, where you can get a free download of my book. And you can also send me a message. You can also go to the Recovered on Purpose page as well. I like to collaborate with people. I think that networking is, like, if there's a million of us that have these podcasts and a million of us that are trying to help addicts out there suffering, then there's that a million more people that have an opportunity to find some hope. So
Yeah.
please feel free to reach out.
All right, that's great. All right, so hang tight for me. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on all social media: Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and TikTok. You can also check out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you'll find plenty of free resources and free literature. So I hope you enjoyed today. And until next time.